All right. Hello, everyone who may or may not be watching. I do not care right now. This is the first episode of the BlackGate podcast. I am your host, Sauron, the Dark Lord of Mordor. Whether you believe that's true or not, I don't care. And today with me, I have technically four, maybe three guests. I'll let them introduce themselves right now.
Yeah, who wants to go first? I'm used to going last, but I can start if nobody else is willing to, I suppose. I'm the Osseophile. I'm somebody from Twitter. I think well, most people know me from Twitter who know me, period, right? I've got YouTube presence, and I do and don't do. I'm fairly inactive, I suppose. Have been for a very long time on YouTube, and yeah, I do sort of analysis type of content on and off. Uh, Very infrequently, let's put it that way. And I stream too. So, but yeah, I'm sort of here on a almost on a whim. Just this opportunity came up, and yeah, I'm here. So yeah.
All right. And then I'll say Slim since you're unmuted. Slim. All right, James.
I think we lost Slim.
Rip. All right, I'm James Stern. I
Hello,
am
James.
one of the creators from Mythoverse Comics. I don't know what else to say. I enjoy animation. I like comics. I'm a nerd.
I feel like that applies to a lot of us here.
Is that your sort of self-ascribed identity? I'm a nerd.
I wouldn't say it's a self-ascribed identity. It's just an observation. I'm into nerdy shit.
I see.
And last but not least, we have Slim, who may still be alive.
Well, hopefully he's still alive.
Seems fairly dead.
All right, maybe he had to step away for a second.
Yeah. Well,
So in that
DJ's
case,
here.
yep, DJ's.
Okay, I'm here. Sorry.
That's
I'm
all good.
I'm Slim. I'm a cynical asshole with opinions, essentially. If you just, I'm halfway awake right now. Fuck.
It's all good, man. We're all running on fumes. I have a feeling of. I live on no sleep.
Yeah, that's good for you, but some of us have to get up in the morning, sadly.
Weakness. And then last but not least, we have DJ, who's kind of in and out.
Good evening, everyone. I'm DJ Powell Conquest, and I'm an optimist with opinions. That's not like everyone else.
That's great. There's a great duality here to begin with. That's great. Always love dualistic scenarios. So this ought to be interesting.
Right. So to finish off the intro, as I said before, this is the first episode of what may be a reoccurring thing. It depends on how I feel because I am very much an emotional man. Not really. We'll see about that. And today's first episode, we will be answering the age-old question that has plagued humanity since the dawn of time, probably before it too. Star Wars: The Clone Wars, 2D versus 3D. Which is better? Asterisk, there is no better. We're just here to discuss Star Wars shit. So
essentially, yeah.
All right. So for context, in case anyone is unaware, you uncultured swines, there are two main Star Wars cartoons that featured the depiction of the Clone Wars, which is, the war that happened before the Galactic Civil War and all that jazz in the prequel trilogy. You have the 2003 2D animation show that was done by Gendry Tartakovsky. I can never pronounce names.
Gendy Tartakovsky.
What he said. And the second series, which came out in 2008 by one Dave Filoni. Rhymes with baloney. And essentially, they do the same thing in the sense of they tell what happened between episodes 2 and 3, which later the 3D show kind of went into episode 3, but generally it's the same thing. And a debate that has been amongst Star Wars fans for probably ever since the two shows came out is which one is the superior show? In truth, there is no correct answer. But like most men in the modern age, we're going to try to answer it anyways. And from what I have here, everyone here has, for the most part, seen both shows, I'm going to assume. I hope so.
Yeah, I might be the problem here because I never saw all of the 3D CG animated Clone Wars. I stopped after season 2 because it started going off in a direction that I wasn't really happy with, and so I sort of quit. I was like, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm done with this."
Yeah, you picked. Yeah, you picked the real. Yeah, you missed out on a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't because I'm aware of what happened after, and none of it appeals. Just nothing. Not the Mortis arc, not the Ahsoka, murder arc, whatever that was. None of it, especially not the Night Sisters arc. That was atrocious, terrible idea. Raped so many things about the established lore at the time.
Yeah, so we're going to get into that in just a second. But before we go into that, we're just going to kind of go, excuse me, a little round table. And just off the bat, Jesus, I've been drinking whiskey, so excuse me.
That's fine.
We're just going to kind of say off the bat, if you had to pick a show, gun to your head, you had to pick a show which you prefer to watch, not necessarily saying it's better, you just prefer it. Which one would you pick? I'm going to start and say I'm a sucker for the 2D show. Next, I'm going to go with James.
2D, but then again, anything by Genndy Tartakovsky is Kino in my book.
All right. And then, how do you say your name?
The Osseophile.
Osseophile. All right. And what is your preferred show? I think we kind of already know.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, and I think I made it very clear in the last sentence that yes, I am in fact far and away partial to the Genndy Tartakovsky show. So,
all right, and then Slim.
Let's see here. Like I said pre-stream, I think I would say that I would lean more towards the 3D series, honestly.
Okay, and then last but not least, DJ.
Oh, I'm actually pretty much in the middle between the original 2D Clone Wars and the 3D.
All right, so that's fair because I mean, like again, there is no true right answer here. So, before we start though, I remember I did a couple of polls on Twitter. In hindsight, I probably should have asked better questions, but cut me some slack. This is my first time doing this. So one of the questions I asked generally is, what do most people prefer? We had 17 votes, and the majority, 76% going for the 2D show.
that's
Let's
unexpected.
see.
I was not expecting that. I have to
I
be
wasn't
honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that either. As far as people, I wanted to see how many people actually saw the 2D show, with 19 votes, being 84%, because I'm going to get into that a little bit later.
Right.
Which series did you watch first? No surprise. 89% of people said the original 2003 2D show. And then last but not least, and this is where it's kind of the more important question, which series would you say fits in better with the overall Star Wars canon, EU or Disney? With 52% voting for the 2D show, 19% voting for the 3D, 23% saying they both fit in pretty well, and about 5% saying neither show fits in. So now I'm really going to ask that final question because I kind of get the gist, but what would you guys say fits in better with the canon?
Well, I suppose it sort of depends whether you mean the Disney timeline or the Legends timeline here. Which one are you talking about?
So, for the sake of being fair, actually, you know what? I'll let you answer both. Like, which one? Like, how about this?
Sauron, buddy, I love you, but yeah, you can't. We're not gonna get anywhere if you keep fence sitting. Just say what you mean.
Yeah.
We understand. We understand you're trying to be nuanced here, but just say what you mean, buddy. It's cool.
Ooh,
All right. So
direct.
fuck it. All right. So fuck it. All right. Which one do you? Just right out say it. If you think it fits well with the EU, say so. If you think it fits in well with Disney, say it. If you think it fits in with both, just go ahead and say it.
Right. So, are we talking about the 2D or the CGI show?
Let's start with 2D.
All right. Well, given that the 2D show doesn't even exist in the canon timeline, I think it's like fairly obvious what the answer would have to be. It aired for the first time around 2003, between 2003 and 2004. It was sort of led up to Revenge of the Sith at the time. And it was designed with the Clone Wars multimedia the project to fit in with those stories, that the novels and the comics and the games that were coming out at the time, in addition to Attack of the Clones, obviously. So, yeah, it's very much very deeply rooted in the sort of Legends side of things. And I think it's actually impossible to take it out of that context.
Right. And
Hon-
yeah, go ahead,
honest,
Slim.
honestly, both could fit in together. Like, here's the thing. Here's the thing. The thing about TD version is, you're right. It did try to like lead into episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and it was ultimately what it was supposed to do. And I think like it does. Like I said, it does a very. It does a very. It's a very base level miniseries leading into Revenge of the Sith. So there's some good foreshadowing, and there's some good explanation as to why Grievous um is coughing and wheezing in Revenge of the Sith, yada yada yada. And I think like that. I think like it's very, like I said, it's very base. It's very base level with what it offers to overall Star Wars lore. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, if you didn't watch the 2D Clone Wars, ultimately you wouldn't be missing much in terms of the lore, because the only thing that really happens in this is showing Grievous getting his chest crushed, and
I mean, you wouldn't.
Anakin officially joining the Jedi Council. I'm trying to think of more.
I mean, you wouldn't miss much if you like skip the 3D show either. I mean, there's
No.
plenty of lore building in the 2D series.
Uh,
There's a ton there.
I
It's
mean,
sort of
can I see? I'm just saying right now. No, I'm not saying that there isn't like lore in the 2D series. I'm saying like there's lore that doesn't really change any. There's lore in there that doesn't change any serious, and I think that was intentional, because again, this is meant to be like a mini series that wasn't meant to go deep. It wasn't meant to go. It wasn't really meant to go deep into the. It wasn't really meant to go that deep into Star Wars.
no,
And I
but
think that's
but to say that it didn't change things, that's patently ridiculous. I mean, we have Anakin getting knighted. We have the first introduction of General Grievous. We have all these different things.
I'm not
So
saying I'm not.
I think
I'm,
what he's trying to say is that, like, because you're right, it does. I do agree it adds stuff, but I think he's trying to say that, like, if you were to skip it, you wouldn't necessarily like.
it wouldn't change. It wouldn't change your.
It wouldn't
here's
change them. Well,
It wouldn't change your outlook. It wouldn't change your outlook on Star Wars. That's where I think. That's where I think when I. That's what I tried to say. Like, it was very what I said pre-stream, and I tried to explain it. it's not that it doesn't have any. So when I say it was more style than substance, I'm not saying that it didn't have any substance at all. I'm not saying there's nothing there. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, if you watch the 3D Clone Wars series, there's stuff that's there. There's stuff about the characters. There's stuff about the lore. There's stuff about the Jedi. There's stuff about the Sith. There's stuff about the Force. All in the 3D series that can fundamentally change how you view the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, but most of
And
that
I
stuff
don't.
was
And I don't.
established
Okay.
beforehand.
Can I?
I
Can
think-
I want to finish here. I want to finish here with the 2D version. This is stuff that we either already knew or stuff that was. I'm not saying not reasonable. Saying it's kind of superficial, that it doesn't add anything overall that changes your view on Star Wars as a whole. I think that the 3D version does have stuff in there that changes your view of the entire. That's why a lot of people keep saying the 3D show is what helped fix the prequels, and they said, like, there's stuff in the prequels we want to see done better. We want to see Anakin done better. We want to
But
see
nothing in the prequels was broken.
I'm not
Alright,
saying the
oh,
prequels.
yeah.
I'm not saying the prequels are broken. I'm saying that the prequels is a good story told objectively poorly. There's stuff in the prequels that do work. It's a good story. It's just told poorly. And the 3D show does expand on that and does fix a lot of problems that the prequels did do poorly. I'm
All
sorry.
right, if I may interject, I think I get what Slim is trying to say is that, like, the 2D show, it adds stuff, but it's not necessarily like it's like
It's not. It's
when-
like it's
when
like
the
I
3D
said. It's
show
not.
adds something, it's like there's so much, and for better or worse, there's so much more depth to what it's adding that it can change your entire perspective on certain events of the movies, as opposed to where the 2D show, while it does add some depth to it, it's not inherently enough to change your entire perspective. Like, for example, like the scene of Anakin getting knighted in the 2D. That's awesome. I don't care what anybody says, that's awesome. However, when you get to
There's
episode 3, you
nothing-
already see he's a knight, so you don't necessarily need to see that to understand the context of what happened. It's still cool to see it.
You could just as easily say Anakin didn't need to have a Padawan in the first place. I thought that always felt very out of place.
Yeah,
Never fit in.
And I agree with that. I do agree that essentially I think Ahsoka was
Before we go too much deeper, I want to go ahead and get James's, Yoda's, and DJ's answer. So I'm gonna start with Yoda.
So I think my views on it, I think the 2D series, as is already kind of stated, fits very well into the prequels. It's very well integrated into the multimedia release. It's very well integrated into the story. Although I will agree with Slim that in terms of story, it's not that there's no story and that there's a lack of story, but it's very streamlined. It's point A to point B, not really exploring anything in between the lines. Whereas the 3D series does a lot more to kind of go deeper into things. It's not so much of a streamlined point A to point B experience. And personally, that's something I enjoyed about the 2D series. Is there's no time for nonsense. It's just a little bit of story, flashy action sequences,
Yeah, it's by
beautifully
design.
animated. Yeah, but I think both styles are equally valid. I think you can have the super streamlined, quote unquote, style over substance, and then you can also have the more deep exploration of various concepts and storylines that you get with 3D series. I think ultimately which one fits better is just depending on what you're looking for in Star Wars. Are you looking for the lore? In which case you may enjoy the 3D series more, or are you looking for kind of like the overarching story and then kind of the flashy action? Then you might want to go more with the 2D series. I think they just kind of they're both good. They just do different things better than the other series.
Yeah, I actually agree with that statement. Before I go any deeper, DJ, what's your answer?
Uh, also, I'll say that for the TV series, it does, as much as before it does like fit in like relatively well multi-yearly with prequels and with the original expanded universe and how things like came to be and which led to the events of Revenge of the Sith. How and it led to the overarching storyline of the prequel trilogy. However, if you want to look into more backstory
You're kind of
and
roboting there.
Yeah, and like, is it possible you can like either get closer to your mic or something because we're not hearing you that well.
Alright, how about now?
That's a lot better.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
Yeah.
Oh, one second. If you want to get more backstory and lore for say important major moments with characters or events happen within Star Wars, then we go to 3D series in 2008 after the original Clone Wars series ended in 2005. So I could say like either like they both have the validity, but one does better over the other. However, at the same time, I can understand why people feel that the 3D series Clone Wars doesn't fit in the timeline at the time before the Disney buyout, because seeing United as a is an awesome establishing moment for the character, because see him grow from the Padawan and all his recklessness becoming more mature. Whereas in the 3D series, you see him already getting a Padawan of his own, which when you think about it doesn't really add up, because it usually takes years for a recently inducted Jedi to gain years of experience before they get a Padawan of their own.
Right. Yeah,
I mean,
and then there's the fact that the 3D show went out of its way to blatantly break existing lore. There are many character deaths that are basically like retconned out of existence, like Adi Gallia. The sort of events leading up to the Battle of Coruscant are retconned out of existence with the latest season of the Clone Wars. It's now a completely different story than what it was with the 2D animated, the Genndy Tartakovsky series. So it doesn't fit. Like there are events that fit in with one another, but like the overarching, the overarching shape of things doesn't fit. It's incompatible.
I
Right.
mean, if you really I'm not even really saying that they both can't exist. I'm saying, are we talking about like, can they both exist like in the same like continuity or something
Yes.
like that? Or
Yeah.
are we saying like that?
I'll
Like,
save that specific question later. I'm just gonna say, if you had, let's say you had to pick which one fit better with between episodes 2 and 3, which one would you say is more believable as this is what happened between these movies versus the other?
I'm still gonna stick with my answer about the Genndy Tartakovsky show. So
All right.
like I said, it's easier to go for that because, like I said, there's not really a whole lot that once you think about it,
that's not why I went for it, though. That's not the reason.
I think I get what Slim is trying to say. Again, it's like, just to kind of repeat it, is that like, because technically, yes, a lot happens in the 2D show. However, the way it's presented is that, because keep in mind, like, the 2D show ultimately is like 4 hours long. Season 1, I don't even think it's like volume 1. I don't even think it's a solid 2 hours. I think it's like an hour 40 minutes. And then season 2 or volume 2 is closer to 2 hours versus the 3D series, which has 7 seasons.
But in some way, you're comparing apples and oranges here, because the 2D show was designed to fit in with everything else. It was designed to fit in with the multimedia project, whereas this new show, it sort of exists in a kind of vacuum outside of the multimedia project.
Right,
So
and that was the other thing I was gonna bring up is that like so this is kind of my take on it in the sense that like because of the way the 2D show is presented, the way it is kind of because a lot happens. Like if you were to count how many battles technically take place and really kind of think about how long it would take these battles to take, a lot happens. You got the whole I can't think of every single freaking planet in that show, but
you got Munilist, you got you got the duel in Yavin 4, you got all these different things. So
right. So a lot of stuff happens, but the way it's presented, it's very much kind of like Slim said. It is very streamlined. There is depth there if you were to read into the stuff and know a lot of the backstory, but from a very surface level, it tells you it kind of it's like to me it goes to point A, point B, point C. The 3D show kind of goes here's point A, here's point A, point one, point A, point two, and then it goes to B. So I feel like because of that, for me, the 2D show fits in better because it doesn't like it gives you
Because
just enough.
like I said, it's just easier. It's just easier to put that in there because, like I said, there's not really like I keep saying, it's not that there's no substance. I'm saying and I'm not saying it's not even good. I'm just saying that the substance that is there, there's just not a whole lot there.
that's not true. I mean,
I think what he's saying is that like
no. Listen. Whether you see substance, whether you can like perceive substance in a movie or a video game or a book or a show, whatever else it might be, that really depends on your perspective. It depends on your lens that you're using to analyze the piece of media with, and it depends on the baggage that you're coming into the experience with. It depends on all these different things. Somebody who has a degree in philosophy is a lot more likely to see much more substance in a show than somebody who does not.
I think he's saying like on a surface level without diving in any deeper than what the show gives you. Like for example,
Yeah, but why
Okay,
would we use the
okay. Let me give you an example here, buddy. Let me give you an example. What do we learn more of what do we learn more about what do we learn about more about Anakin's perspective on the Clone Wars from the 2D from the 2D compared to the 3D show? What do we learn about Obi-Wan's perspective compared to the 2D show to the 3D show? That's where I'm getting at. You can't sit here and tell me like this is all a subjective take on things when I know for a fact that we go deeper into these characters, we go deeper into what the Clone Wars what actually happened in the Clone Wars, how it affected people, how it affected the galaxy, all these things. This happened in the that
wasn't the point I was making, though.
But you're trying to tell me like that I get what you're trying to say, like, oh, you don't see substance here because of your perspective of how you went into it.
Right.
No, I do. Like I said, I'm not saying there's no substance here. I'm just stating
I
that
know
the substance
you keep repeating that, but the point is, you said there's little substance or next to no substance.
I didn't say there was next to no substance. I said that I'm just saying that the substance that is there. I'm not saying that there is little to no substance there. I'm stating that it's very much a show that's trying to be style over substance, and the stuff that is there, the substance that is there, I'm just gonna say it is not very in depth, and it does feel very surface level. Overall, I'm not saying that there isn't any
at all.
I'm not saying there isn't. No, I want to be upfront here. No, I'm not saying that there is no substance. I'm stating that the substance, in my opinion, is very surface level. I do believe that. Oh well, he's struggling to keep his secret with Pat. Basically, what they're doing is they're repeating what we already know from Episode 3. If you've seen Episode 3 of Star Wars. The 2D series is doing nothing more than saying, "Oh, well, you heard this Episode 3. Well, now you're hearing it here." That's basically what you're doing. We heard it in episode 3. You're hearing it here.
Well, that's
wait.
Anakin and Padme throughout the 3D Clone Wars as well. It's just them trying to keep their secret.
Oh.
There's
Yeah, because like just to kind of because I see where you're both.
Padme has her own outing in
Yeah,
in
I
the in the
see where you're
2D
both
show as
coming
well.
from.
So
I see where you're both coming from. So because one thing I will say is that like this, I'm going to give 2 examples to me. It kind of goes to both things that you're saying. Is that for example, like in the 3D show, like yes, the 2D show shows Anakin and Padme together and them hiding their secret, but in the 3D show they have that too. But there's a lot of moments where it's like there are moments where to me there are characters who kind of like it's like I don't understand how no other person in this universe realized what was going on between the 2 of them.
No,
And
that's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. In the 3D show, it's basically an open secret. Obi-Wan knows about it. Rex knows about it. It's heavily implied Ahsoka knows about it.
right,
It's
but
kind of an open secret. That's kind of what the 3D show solidified.
Here's
Like-
where I'm going with that though, in the sense that like, so the 2D show, you know, the hiding secret, but it doesn't really paint any character as knowing about it. However, in the 3D show, it paints it like, as you said, people basically know about it. And to me, while yes, that is technically more depth into what the 2D show presents on the very, you know, basic level, that it's adding more layers to it. However, my issue is that like it seems kind of ridiculous that so many people basically know about this but didn't say a word about it, in the sense of like because in the movie it's very much like no one knew about this. It was blindsided everybody. But in the show, it's hinted at, like, you know, some people the 3D show is kind of presented as people know.
I mean,
and
like in episode.
while-
like in episode 3. I mean, like, to be fair, like it's not really heavily discussed. It's just like Obi-Wan, just like, oh, it's Anakin's, isn't it? And she's like, yeah, it's Anakin's, and like, yep, I kind of figured, and that's all it is. It wasn't really deep, like I said, it wasn't really deeply explored in the prequels either. Honestly, if we're being upfront, it's one of the reasons people didn't like it. And like I said, I think that it's done well in the 2D series too, where it shows that they do genuinely care about each other. They do that, but it's very surface level. It's the same. I love you. We got to keep it secret. Okay, fine, cool.
There's absolutely nothing surface level about the relationship between Anakin and Padme, though. Nothing. It's absolutely in depth. But this really like turning into like a battle between 2 perspectives here. So what do we?
Right.
Like,
So yeah, my second point though that I was going to mention is that in the 2D show, that I'm speaking from my perspective of watching it. At the time when I was watching it and rewatching it, whenever you want to call it, the first time, whatever, there is a bounty hunter character they introduced called Dirge. I'm assuming most people kind of know who that guy is already off the top of my head. If you don't, he's basically this badass. I don't know what species he comes from off the top of my head.
He's a Gendai, and he was introduced in a comic a year before the show, actually.
Right. So yeah, but to be fair, again, I'm speaking from my perspective. I wasn't that into comics, especially not anything that wasn't like your basic superhero comic book. So I had no idea who this guy was. When he showed up on the screen, I was like, this guy's awesome. He's badass. I love him. It wasn't until years later, when I kind of got old enough to really, really get into comics, to kind of explore outside of it, did I like dive in deeper to the Star Wars like lore in terms of comic book side of things. And that's when I learned his whole backstory of like he was alive back when the ancient Sith were still around.
Right.
He hunted Jedi back then. Basically, he was like, aside from the obvious history of the Jedi and the Sith, he was like a direct connection to the old Republic days of the ancient Sith Empire. And in retrospect, knowing that now or knowing that later, he became instantly another top favorite of Star Wars characters. He was already cool enough for me, but that backstory elevated him. And again, I understand the 2D show has its limitations. However, you know, from watching the show alone, I wouldn't have never learned that. And so that's kind of where I get where Slim's coming from, in the sense that like the show, because I do sort of disagree that I'm not saying this is what you're saying, Slim. I do agree that like it has depth. However, I feel like, and again, this probably comes from the restraints they had from making the show, but I feel like there's a lot more depth they could have gone into. And the 3D show, for better or for worse, it goes deeper into the depth. Regardless if you like it or not, what they explore, I do think that the 3D show kind of goes deeper into those moments.
Yeah, that's kind of like my whole thing. I'm not saying like I said, there's not a whole, like I said, there's not a whole lot, like I keep saying this over and over again because I'm trying to point this out. I'm saying that there's not a whole lot of substance in 2D show, and I'm not saying the substance is bad, and I'm not saying there's no substance there. I'm just saying there's not a whole lot of substance overall in the 2D show, in my opinion. And if you want to say my opinion, fine, but whatever. I'm just saying, like, if there's nothing new I learned about the Force in the 2D show. Everything I know about the Force I already know about in the 2D show. Everything I know about Obi-Wan I already know in the 2D show. Everything I know about Yoda I already know in the 2D show. Everything I know about the ancients, there's no like I said, and what you're talking about is a great example of this, because you wouldn't have known all this stuff about Dirge, about how he's from an ancient from an ancient alien race and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that was not cool or whatever. I'm saying at the very end of the day, that's more like, it's not the 2D show that went into that detail. It was the comics that came out before it that's a connection to that. So what I'm trying to say is the show is very surface level on what it presents, and what it presents in the like I said, in the overexternal universe. That doesn't mean that I don't think there's no substance there. I'm not even saying that there's not there's not stuff you can't go into. I'm just saying, like, if you wanted more in-depth look into it, if you wanted a more in-depth look into Star Wars and these characters during the Clone Wars, the actual in-depth look into the Clone Wars, what the characters are actually going through, and again, like all these things about the Force and the Jedi, the Sith, everything else, I think the Clone Wars, the 3D show, did a better job of that. And again,
right.
it takes, and again,
okay, so so for the sake of
I'm kind of wondering about the age disparity here. I'm wondering about how the perspective changes. Like, I'm wondering about Stern. James, how old are you, man?
Internet anonymity, my dude. I'm in my 20s.
That's me too. Yeah, in my late 20s anyway. So, but yeah, I'm kind of wondering how that sort of nostalgia and the kind of that age disparity affects your view on these, different things.
Well, I want to hear James's and DJ's like answer. Like, how do they feel going a bit? Like, okay, you know what? Let me just. James, do you have anything to add to what was being said just now? Anything?
So I'm gonna be honest. I tuned out a tiny bit during that because it seemed like a lot of repetition. My understanding is that was a lot about like the lore, and kind of lore implications of each series. So I'd say I'm generally in agreement with Slim in that 3D series is great for extended lore, character motivations, that sort of thing. 2D series is a very nice point A to point B, not unimportant, but definitely simplified story that packs a lot more action and style than the 3D series does. I have more I want to share, but I'm not. It might be better in a different section of the conversation.
All right.
All right,
'Cause
and DJ, what are
I
your
really
thoughts?
want to talk about villain introductions.
Oh yeah, we're gonna
I
get to
want to
that.
talk about that so much.
We're gonna get to that because, oh boy, I got some stuff for that one. DJ, you got anything to add?
Well, there's one thing that I can add. When you brought out the mention you brought up Dirge and him being a direct connection to the old Republic, probably specifically like the ancient Sith and him hunting down the ancient Jedi. You can make an argument that it encourages people to look into like that character
Yeah.
more through the comic books and the novels, as well as which then in turn leads them to go back and read comics that focus on the old Republic era of Star Wars, specifically like how the Jedi and the Sith came to be and how everything eventually led up to the present day at the time. And that's all I can add after that. With both the 2D for the 2D and the 3D, it gives people access in exploring characters like Dirge as they want to like brush up or open up their minds to the overall history of Star Wars from its ancient past to its current day.
Right, because yeah, because yeah, like I do think personally, I don't want to say that's a bad thing in the sense that like it's kind of not, I won't say making you, but it's like I don't even want to say requires you. It kind of implores you to dive deeper beyond the show. I don't want to say that's a bad thing because it's not, because there's a lot of great Star Wars extended media out there that I got into because of like I played blank video game, which led to me diving into blank story. And Dirge is probably the best example of that. And I do think, and to me, it's one of those where I feel like if the 2D show had like say more time in its development, in the sense that like let's say episode 3 comes out and Cartoon Network or whoever was behind Lucasfilm or whoever was given the green light for that, they said, all right, this show was so great, we're going to let you dive even deeper into it. I feel like we might have gotten to see some of that stuff in the 2D show. It might have been a kind of a shot in the foot, given how the 2D show literally ends where episode 3 begins. But I do feel like if we had more time, or if the show had more time, we would have seen a lot more of that stuff. But at the same time, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because again, a lot of the Star Wars material I got into was basically because of that, in the sense like, here's this cool character, I dive deeper in other materials. And I think that's kind of what they were going for, in the sense that like they wanted people to get into the other material, and they used blank material to do so.
Yeah, I think there's a unfortunate undertone permeating this conversation that just kind of takes it by fiat that more is better, and that's not necessarily the case.
I'm not saying I'm not.
More Star Wars has not obviously been better for the franchise. In fact, more Star Wars has been disastrous for the franchise. Like getting a Star Wars movie every year, getting several shows, Star Wars becoming this very mainstream thing all over again. Because you have to understand, like before the Disney buyout, Star Wars was like this. It wasn't necessarily an underground thing, but it was like somewhere between the mainstream and the underground, right? The comics were not read, very widely. The games were played, but as far as the comics and the novels, those weren't. I mean, sure, some of them reached like New York Times bestseller list, right? Even number one, but it was like fairly rare, at the time. So
My argument isn't like more is better. My argument is that I think that the 3D. I just say it. Sorry, I'm halfway awake right now. I'm saying that the 3D. I'm saying that the 3D I think 3D Clone Wars just had more depth. That's
I
just
think
over. I think it has more depth. And what Sauron was talking about um is kind of like saying I get what you're saying, like, hey, you got this character Dirge and you found him out through the 2D Clone Wars, which is cool. And I'm not saying that's not cool. I'm saying it's pretty awesome. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, you want to learn more about this. You're not going to learn more about this in the show. You're going to learn more about this through a comic because you want to see more, and that's great. That's great if it's because it feels more like a commercial, and the commercial is supposed to sell you everything you want in a limited amount of time, and that's kind of like how I feel with the 2D Clone Wars, is that it feels like a commercial for Star Wars. And I
I
don't know if
feel
that's
exactly the opposite. I feel like the 3D one is the commercial, and the 2D one feels like this weird indie animation, like experimental project that combines Samurai Jack with the Star Wars universe. It feels exactly the opposite for me.
okay.
how does oh
So
no
that actually
I
that's
want to
actually
no I want to know, how does the 3D version seem like, and now how does the 3D version seem like a commercial?
It it made, well, I mean, there's a lot of different dimensions here. Like, let's stick the clones, for example, right? It adds personalities to the clones, which is it's a matter of taste, I suppose, whether that's a good thing or not. But to me, it always sort of felt like giving personalities to all the clones always felt to me a very sort of cynical, cash grabby kind of a way to create
Okay,
more action figures.
okay. First of all, the entire point of giving the clones personality was to show that they're not.
I
No,
know
they're
all right,
what
all
not.
right.
I know I
Wait,
know
No,
what
no.
the point is. I
No.
know
I'm
what the
saying
point is. I'm
no.
that that's not what I'm
But you
going
just.
for.
But
I'm
you just said it felt you felt like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
just
it
said
does
it felt
feel,
cash grab. You just said
yeah.
it felt
all
cash
right. So
grabby and
all
stuff
right, all
like
right,
that.
all right, all right, all
So
right, all right.
Yeah, yeah, it does
no,
feel
No, no,
that
no,
way
no,
to
no,
me.
no, no, no,
And
no. All right, all right.
I want to ask you this. Okay. So you can say that. So you're assuming the intent of what Dave Filoni had for the clones was essentially, I'm gonna give them separate personalities, and then I'm gonna give literally an entire squad of them an entire character arc
I
along.
said it feels that way to me. I didn't say
All
that
right.
was the
So
intent. I said it feels
that's where I'm
that
kind
way
of
to me.
jumping in
It
because at
gives
this
me
point,
that vibe, and it
because
turns me off because of that.
all right. So at this point now, we're arguing preferences, so that's a
Exactly.
never-ending thing. So
Yeah,
we're just gonna
exactly.
move on from there because it's a good thing you brought up the clones because that's another. Okay, so you brought up the clones, and that's another thing I wanted to bring up
Right, right.
is that the clones have a very. Let's be very honest here. The clones have a very different depiction in the two shows.
Mm,
I rewatched some of the 2D and 3D before this, and even in the early episodes of both shows, it is very clear that the clones are depicted in very different ways.
yeah,
In the 2D show, there is no, well, yeah, I'll say it. The personality is they are soldiers. That's
yes,
it. They are soldiers. This is what they're here to do. There's
yeah.
nothing else. There's even a moment where Obi-Wan, Commander Cody's reporting to Obi-Wan, where he's saying, Commander Cody's like, with the bombardment going at the current rate, we should have the shield
3
down
months. In 3
in three
months.
months. And Obi-Wan's like, we've been here for months
A month
already.
already.
It's like, I
Yes,
know,
sir.
sir.
We're right on
Right on
schedule.
schedule. And then, like, it's funny because not only is, like, like to Commander Cody, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
He's like, this is
yeah.
perfect.
This is somebody who's here, like, this is his job, right? To bomb the shield, and he's gonna take as much time as it takes to, bring it down and attack, and get the mission done. And that was the clones until the 2008 series, and I like that. That was my. I like the idea that these are drones that are grown. Like that was the initial thesis with the clones, right? In Attack of the Clones, right? You're talking about like the Republic using drones essentially, like grown in vats, human beings, and sending them off to die, right, in the field of battle. So there was a moral conundrum, also, a deeper kind of a thematic conundrum in that sense. You're talking about the the good guys using live soldiers, and the supposed bad guys, the separatists, right? They're the ones using the droid army, right? So like that's the reason why I prefer the clones the way they were before they gave them like in-depth personalities and stuff like this in the Dave Filoni series.
Right.
Yep.
Because like one of the first arcs they do in the show is it's the one where it's the I can't remember how many there are. There's like a couple of clones.
Which show?
The 3D show. In the 3D
All right,
show,
right,
there's
right.
there's
Okay,
there's an arc early on where it tells the entire episode is told from the perspective of a group of clones trying to defend an outpost that Grievous sent in a bunch of commando droids to take out so he can slip through the defenses of the
Right. Yeah,
Republic.
I think I remember
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, and this, to be fair, this is one of my favorite episodes of the 3D show because I mean I was in the military for a few years and like so I kind of just
Thank you, by the way. Thank you for your
gravitate.
service. I tremendous respect for anybody who's been in the military. So
God, that's like the one question that's so hard to answer. But thank you.
yeah,
It's one of those where it's one of my favorite episodes in the show, even considering all the episodes that come later.
right.
And I really like how it gave them personality. However, I feel like this is something that kind of becomes an issue kind of later in the sense that like because later, spoiler alert for anyone who's never seen Star Wars or anything, but when Order 66 goes down and all the clones turn on the Jedi, in
Right.
the original continuity, from what I understand, now again, it's been a long time since I truly explored a lot of this
Yeah.
stuff, but from what I understand, is that the clones they were such perfect soldiers that the minute they got told that the Jedi were no longer allies of the Republic, they were like, it's over. Their
Yep.
time has come.
Yep.
In
Exactly.
the
Yep.
3D show, because they went so in depth with the personalities. Well, no, let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase it before I give that context. In the 3D show, it's revealed that all clones were given some kind of biochip that the
Yeah.
minute they hear Order 66, they immediately turn on the Jedi. And
Yeah.
unless a clone were to surgically remove that chip,
They have no free will.
they have
There's
no
no
free
choice.
will. They
Yep.
had to
Yep.
kill the Jedi.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to go from each person, starting with James. How do you feel about that? And what would you say is probably the better? What would you say is your preferred characterization for the clones?
I don't really have a preferred characterization. I think it works either way, as they're kind of mindless soldiers or they're humans with lives and emotions. I think what fits in better with the film canon is definitely kind of the mindless drones, perfect soldiers depiction of the clones. But again, like on a personal level, I don't really have a strong
I have
inclination
no
in either
strong
direction.
feelings one way or the other.
Yeah, all right, that's fair. DJ, what about you?
I would have a similar answer, but after the original series ended and the 3D series began, yeah, I I, I liked the characterizations that Rex and the other clones were given, and as their personalities developed over time as they go through like different character arcs. And but honestly, my favorite episode was when Rex and the crew were trying to look for a traitor, which not only puts their relationship as like a family because they see each other's brothers to the but also the test their willpower. Or so eventually
Right.
when Order 66 happened, like you can't help but feel like feel sorry. Sorry for the clones, because they're essentially being made to on the turn on the Jedi, while the others they were able to resist and escape from the massacre of Jedi when Order 66 came to be. So, uh, in other words, I would have answered the mindless I would have answered the mindless drones as perfect soldiers would make sense. Make sense in terms of like the continuity and so on. But I've got but because the 3D series like gave Rex and the crew so much depth as they go through their character developments, I in a way lean towards them getting that characterization from the 3D series.
Yeah, it's a very fair point to make. Like with the caveat that if you care enough about these characters, right? If you have enough interest and enough of a personal connection with them, then yes, I think that's a very kind of valid argument to make. However, at the same time, to be sure, I'm not saying I'm completely opposed to the idea of some clones having personalities, right? I'm talking about the fact that all of them do right now. Every single one that appears on screen almost has a personality, right? I like the idea, like in the old expanded universe, you had a select few that had strong personalities, like Alpha
Yeah.
17, for example.
Yeah.
This ARC trooper, Alpha 17, who had a very sardonic and very cynical worldview, and there was an explanation for it. Like, he was an ARC trooper, right? So he had more of Django's. He was less sort of genetically modified than the rest of the clones, right? He was more independent, I suppose you could say, than the other clones of his generation. So yeah, I'm not opposed completely to the idea of the clones having personalities. I just don't like that, all of them do, essentially. I'm being tautological here, but yeah.
Honestly, like the way I always saw it is that, like, because again, like when it comes to the 3D show, like I love the clone troopers. Like I love them in both versions. They are probably one of my favorite aspects of the Clone Wars in general. I
Yep.
love the idea that they are the perfect soldiers, and I also love the characterization and kind of like individuality they're all given in the 3D show.
Yeah.
One thing that always kind of stuck with
Yeah.
me is that, like, as much as I like what the 3D show does, I feel like, and again, this is me, my opinion. I'm not going to say this is what Filoni had in mind, nor am I going to say he was wrong in case he did have this in mind. But I feel like it always rubbed me the way that, like, he gave them so much individuality and depth that it begged the question of why would these guys ever turn on the Jedi? Like, especially when, like, they're so not saying it's a bad thing either, because
Yeah,
this is the thing happens.
but
Like, they're
like
so familiar with them.
that's why I need the chip, though. Like, if you give them the
Right.
personalities, you need the chip to force that, like, on them, force the Order 66 on them,
And yeah,
because
that's what I was gonna.
yeah.
That's what
Otherwise,
I
it
was gonna
becomes
say. Is that the
completely
chip? To
yeah.
me, again, this is my opinion. I'm not saying this is what Filoni had in mind. I'm not gonna say he was wrong to do this in case it was what he did. But to me, it always felt like the chip was like, he may have had this planned out, but it felt like the chip was like they kind of realized what they had done with the clones
Right,
and
right.
realized they needed something to explain why these guys would turn on the Jedi.
Yeah.
However, I do think it could have still worked that they were such perfect soldiers that the minute they got that order, the majority of them turned. And then you could have saved
To
a
be
life.
fair, in the 3D show, they in a very blatant way, they reveal like what it is to be a perfect soldier, which is following orders, right? So good soldiers follow orders. That's the thing. Um, to be a good soldier is not to have empathy. It's not to be empathetical. It's to follow orders. What your superiors like. You've been in the army, right? You know what it is to be a good soldier, right?
Right.
It's to follow orders. To like, if it's to kill people, you kill people. That's what, like, ethics don't really enter into the realm of soldierly, I suppose, if you could put it that way. At least from where I stand, I never considered the army to be an ethical institution. I consider it to be an institution of violence.
Yeah, so like when it comes to the clones, like when it comes to the two depictions of the clones, I'm
Right.
very 50-50. Like if you were to ask me my favorite, that's definitely the one spot where I just couldn't tell you which one I prefer. I like both. I like aspects of both. I think you could have done a fusion of the two if necessary, but I cannot sit here and say which one I overall
Yeah.
prefer.
Yeah. Actually, fusion could have worked. Could have worked because it would in theory it would be it wouldn't work because if with the 2D series, they show why the perfect soldier, but then in the 3D, by giving them depth, and depth, it shows you there is more to them than just a perfect soldier. So if they actually use a fusion, it could have worked, and I
Right.
wouldn't have no issue with it whatsoever because before the 3D series I was fine. I was fine with how the clones were depicted. That was until the 3D series came out. I appreciated it of Rex and the clones being given more depth. At saying, however, as the one of my critiques in the 3D Clone Wars is like in retrospect, right? They probably should like give some of the clones personalities while keeping like the others as perfect soldiers as they were
Right.
originally depicted in 2D Clone Wars. So that way you not only have an even amount of clones that have individuality, while others are by the book good soldiers, which actually creates an interesting dynamic between Rex and his crew and the other clone troopers before Order 66 came to be, which led to the massacre of the Jedi.
Yeah, I think there is a kind of synthesis to be found between these two depictions of the clones, but that's probably like beyond the scope of this conversation. So, like, I'm not here to like theorize about what could have been or what should have been. I'm not the type to like suggest to other creative people how to fix what I consider to be wrong with their stories. It's not my job. I'm not the storyteller. I have my views, I have my opinions, I have my takes on things, but ultimately they're just that. They're ultimately worthless. And it just, as soon as you go into the realm of like preferences, it just becomes a power game, right? It becomes a power play on who gets to be right, like who can shout who can shout the hardest and loudest and, things like this. So, and to a certain degree it becomes a popularity contest too. Not that popularity has anything to do with who's right, but yeah.
Yeah, because
All right, I apologize for that. I had to take a step away for a second.
Don't worry about it.
don't worry about it. I was gonna say like, at the end of the day, we're just having honest conversation, and we can agree to disagree as we get an understanding of like where the other person is coming from.
Yeah, from in my experience, like most debates in my 27 years of life, most debates have ultimately come down to a matter of agree to disagree, right? That's how people leave most conversations, right? It's very rare for anybody to change their minds because of a debate.
Yeah. So, all right. So, I'm kind of catching up here. So, I had to take my dog out. She was
Right.
not feeling too well. But all right. So, just to move on to because what time is it? Oh, we'll see. I'm going to go into probably one of the two of the more bigger because there's a lot of because we'll be here all night trying to discuss the differences of what
I
went right, what went wrong. But I'm trying to hit the bigger ones. This next one is a bit more personal in the sense, and I know we kind of talked about it a bit before, but it's with the villain introductions of the two shows and depictions, I guess you could
Right.
say. So in the both shows, 2D and 3D, there's quite a few villains for the most part that appear in both shows. You have Asajj Ventress, who debuted in the 2D show,
No,
and
she
was
didn't. She debuted in a comic, actually. So
all right. Speaking from the shows, though, speaking from the shows,
that's
because
just me being anal about details.
no,
So
because you're right. I was gonna mention that, but I was like, nah. Just so you have Asajj Ventress, who's was in the original 2D show, and you have General Grievous, who again was in the original 2D show.
right.
Then come to the Clone Wars. Here they are again, Asajj Ventress and General Grievous. Now,
Yeah.
um, when it comes to Asajj, when it comes to her like obviously her backstory in the Clone Wars 3D, it's there. It's all there. It's not like the 2D show where there's supplement material. It's all right there in your face. As far as like any retcons, I cannot say for sure just because it's been so long since I
Her
delved into that
backstory,
story.
her backstory was completely retconned
Right.
in the 3D show, and it's one of the biggest contentions that I have with the CG, the Dave Filoni show. So
Right. But given that though, I don't think anyone can deny that at the very least, she was still capable for the most part. I'm not going to sit here and say like she was the ultimate badass in both shows. However, one of the probably biggest things a lot of people talk about when it comes to the comparison of the 2D versus the 3D is a depiction of General Grievous.
yeah,
To where in one show he is literally a Jedi butcher who takes on 5 Jedi, kills most of them, and has council members being like, "We gotta kill this thing." And then you have the 3D show where, yeah,
yeah. I
he's
mean, there's
cartoon
a
kind of villain.
yeah. He in the 3D Dave Filoni series is a lot more faithful to the Lucas depiction as seen in Revenge of the Sith. However, there is a very clear explanation and reason, real life reason why there's a disparity between the two shows, which is the Genndy Tartakovsky show, the micro series, came out before Grievous was written for Revenge of the Sith. So essentially, what Tartakovsky and his team had to go on was the design, the concept art behind Grievous, and the fact that he's a Jedi killer. That's it. So that's what they started out with. That's the ground that they operated on, right? They didn't have the Lucas, even the earliest treatments of the script. So they had to work with what they had, and that's what we got.
Yeah, because I remember it's an interview with Tarkovsky where he talks about how like when he was first given the pitch for Grievous,
Right.
he was essentially told cyborg Jedi
Butcher, yeah.
Yeah, and that was kind of all he had, and that's what he worked with.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it wasn't until later he said Lucas came back to him with a more refined version of Grievous, and I think he says like, this seems more like the mustache twirling villain who's
exactly,
like,
yes.
as he runs off.
Yeah.
And so they kind of had to adjust that.
Yeah, exactly.
However,
right.
Like, I mean, you've already given your opinion. I want to hear James and DJ. What are you guys' thoughts on Clone Wars 2D versus 3D Grievous? I'll start with James.
I think you two have already kind of touched on most of it. Being a sucker for Tartakovsky, I do prefer the 2D version. And I think one of the biggest parts of it is the introduction. So in trying to prepare for this podcast, I did a little bit of searching on the YouTube to see if I can find the character introductions for Grievous in the 2D show and then in the 3D show. And same for Asajj Ventress. 2D show, easy find. Like first couple of results gives you the introduction for each character. Wasn't able to find that for the 3D show. And
yeah, because go ahead.
I think the reason for that is because of how Genndy designed those sequences. So with Grievous, starts with massive droid battle. They're all just firing on a structure that some Jedi are trying to take cover in. And then Grievous holds his hand up. Music cuts, all sound cuts. It's just silence except for like the clanking of droids and one of the Jedi running around. And you don't ever get a full shot of Grievous until he's done some stalking around. The Jedi have had their time to stress out. And the entire sequence, all you ever hear is a little bit of dialogue, the buzzing of the lightsabers. It's just
there is music.
Still.
There is music, but it comes on, toward the actual battle.
But
the actual
and that's my point.
Sequence building up to Grievous is silent for the most part.
Yeah,
the
because
lead up to the full reveal is all quiet though. Like my main point is there's a significant lack of music during much of that sequence. It's not the entire sequence that's silent, but a lot of it.
That's a feature of the show, actually. Overall, there's a very
it's a feature of Tartakovsky in general.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. And I'm glad that sort of carried over from his sensibilities carried over to the show. I think it makes it a bit of a more sort of unique Star Wars experience. You're used to in Star Wars. I think you're used to background music. You're used to kind of music being a storytelling device. But here the silence works as a storytelling device as well. It's great.
Like I was saying, it's a storytelling device.
Yeah, because it's almost like, because this is how I always saw it with the introduction of Grievous, and then I'll get DJ's thoughts on it. But just want to say real quick is that like it reminds me of a combination of a horror movie in the sense that like we don't even see Grievous until he literally crushes a Padawan.
Like a slasher film.
That's our first shot of him. He crushes a Padawan with his body weight alone and stands all the way up and reveals his body. That's our introduction. Yeah. There's also a little bit of like a bit of a Western / samurai movie in like it's basically a standoff where he's just approaching them. They all have their blades, weapons drawn, sweat pouring down their face, and they're just waiting. And the goal is to see who's going to break first, which, the Padawan breaks first. And so to me, it's like, to me personally, when it comes to like Star Wars in general, that introduction of Grievous to me, because the horror movie stuff aside, like the Western samurai stuff, because to me that fits perfectly.
Yeah, there's a lot
of that jazz.
Yeah, there's a lot of like sweeping Kurosawa landscapes, and there's a few Sergio Leone kind of eye shots in there. Yeah, it's very much kind of like there's a Western and samurai elements for sure. So.
All right, DJ, what are your thoughts on Grievous?
The 2D series gave Grievous an epic opening, as well as through visual storytelling show you that he is one terrifying mother. You do not.
Oh yeah.
Someone you do not want to mess with, and with getting his team working with what they have, they were able to make Grievous a terrifying villain that is akin to a slasher horror movie villain, as well as a serial killer, because he didn't get his name. He didn't earn his nickname, the Jedi Butcher, for nothing. You see why and how he got that nickname. Well, also as a caveat, in the other material besides the 3D series, you learn more of Grievous's backstory and why he has such a grudge against the Jedi.
That's
another thing too.
Yeah, he has good reasons. Yeah, it's fair to say he has good reasons. Yes.
Yeah, because his motivation, I guess you can call it now, in the original Legends version versus what it is now. Like in the Legends, like he was basically quote unquote assassinated, and it was framed to look like the Jedi, or Republic, whichever you want to call it, and then that motivated him to get the implants and become the Jedi Butcher.
Yep.
In the 3D, and to be fair, this wasn't really it wasn't really explored in the 3D till a bit later. So I will give him a little bit of credit, because like early on, you could have probably made the argument that maybe that origin was still the same, but that kind of comes down to personal preference at that point. But I know later on it was eventually added to where he basically, in order to compete with the Jedi, he volunteered for the cybernetic enhancements. And it's like, I can kind of see what they were trying to go with that. Like, that in and of itself is not necessarily a bad origin for a character. I just don't think Grievous, given what he had prior, needed that kind of change to his origin.
Yeah. I believe, like, correct me if I'm wrong, it's... Yeah, please just correct me if I'm wrong. You know, it's been over a decade since I last saw any of the episodes of the Clone Wars, the 3D series. I think there's at least one episode dealing directly with Grievous and his like like it's called like the Lair of Grievous or something like that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an early episode where I think it's season 1 where Kit Fisto, a Padawan of his, which I can't remember the name of, and a
It's
group
the
of
Mon
clones,
Calamari, right?
right, where
Right.
they get some kind of beacon or whatever, and they end up on this planet, and it turns out this planet castle, whatever they're exploring, is General Grievous's home. And
Right.
in there, there is a line given to him by his droid doctor, where he mentions that he's submitted to these changes to his body. And
Right.
again, now this is back in like 2008. This is back when the show first aired. When I looked this up, so take this with a big grain of salt.
Yeah.
So one thing, and this might have been fanboys trying to keep the two continuities alive for whatever it was worth, but basically it was kind of stated that like, basically Grievous was ashamed that he got caught in such a assassination attempt.
Right.
And so in order to kind of hide that shame, he simply told people that he submitted to those changes, as opposed to saying like he got caught in
I
an
see.
assassination attempt and
Right.
got blown up. Which,
Right.
to be fair, that sounds that in retrospect now that's probably was just fan theory, fan fiction. But to me, that's a good explanation, because if I was some proud warrior who slaughtered multiple people and basically got worshipped as a god on my home planet, I wouldn't want
Yes.
people to think I got taken out by a bomb.
Yeah, and it works with the idea that Grievous is this kind of cowardly mustache twirling. It also works in that context as well, you know, as somebody who's very insecure, you know, ultimately a coward, insecure about his, you know, image and stuff like this. So, you know, he's known for saying, you know, several times over, you know, taking exception to the idea that he's a droid. You know, he doesn't like being called a droid.
Yeah, and it didn't help that, like, again, this was coming from like expanded stuff, but like basically because he was the general of a droid army,
Right.
it became easier for people to just assume he was a droid, and he hated
Exactly.
that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Given that, like every other general in the Confederate Army, the army of the CIS was like a living organic being. So Dooku was organic, and Ventress was organic, and Grievous is like a precursor to Vader. You know, that's his thematic purpose, is to like foreshadow what happens to like Vader.
Yeah,
So
that's another thing that and this is kind of a side tangent, so and I just want to bring it up because it's an interesting little factoid, is that in the prequels you have three main villains aside from Sidious. You have Darth Maul, Count Dooku, and
Dooku,
General Grievous, and each
yeah,
one of them reflects an aspect
of
of what
Anakin. Yeah.
Anakin slash
Yes.
what Vader is.
Yeah.
Dooku is the fallen Jedi turned to the dark side. Maul is essentially the young man who's corrupted by the ideas of what the dark side could provide, and Grievous is the cyborg who just barely resembles the man he was once before, but is now just a Jedi butcher.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, that doesn't have much to do with the Clone Wars as the shows either one,
Yeah.
but it's still a cool thing to have.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I like the again I'm happy that Tartakovsky brought his. It's essentially Samurai Jack in the Star Wars setting, right? The art style is the art direction is very much the same. The use and disuse of music as a storytelling device is very much the same, and I like the whole aesthetic of the whole thing. You know.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that everyone here is kind of in a rough agreement that of the two versions of Grievous, and this is kind of something I think a lot of fans would agree to, is that the 2D version of Grievous, even if it wasn't necessarily Lucas's ultimate goal,
Mm.
it's still at the very least the cooler version of the character. I think we can all
Well,
agree on that.
Well, I mean, well, it depends, like, what you mean by cool. What is cool? I mean, once
Well,
again, this is very...
I don't want to say better, because again, like,
No, I know that, but I'm talking about like even the sort of what is cool that kind of changes like over time. So, I would argue that yes, in fact, the Gendy Tartakovsky Grievous is by far and away the cooler take on the character. But yeah, it sort of depends again on the person.
Right.
So
So
there's no reliable way to gauge these things. I don't think it's a matter of taste. So
right. So yeah, Grievous, and also I really like I again, one of my favorite moments in the entire 2D show is the siege of Coruscant. Just Grievous just going after the Chancellor, got Shakti and was it three other Jedi that was with her, or was it two other?
yeah, you
But
got the I just their names escape me just now, but
yeah,
yeah, you
but
got the
yeah.
Ithorian and yeah,
So yeah, it's basically like they're it's basically get down, Mr. President. Like he is just relentless. And to me, aside from the
essentially, yeah.
introduction, like I because that's basically that's those two scenes are basically all of Grievous's main appearances in the show. There's a
Yes,
few others in between, but those are the two main ones. And it's like
yeah,
those two appearances alone kind of solidify him as being just this unstoppable monster. And
yeah, and one of the great Star Wars villains as well. So
yeah, like if anyone gets a chance, anyone watching, anyone in the stream, but if you get a chance, like look it up on YouTube. It's basically like it's Grievous's assault on the Chancellor. But it's just that because in the show they kind of cut back and forth between different stuff. But there's a video on YouTube where it has just Grievous's siege, and it's
yeah,
edited good enough in the sense that, like, aside ignoring the obvious jump cuts, but it's such an amazing sequence to see in the
yeah, I
sense that, like, it's so like it's just brutal, like the way he goes through the clones, the way
yes,
he
yeah,
like demolishes, and there is a hint of his arrogance in the moment where he has them cornered and he's literally monologuing, and Shakti uses the force to tie his cape to a
a
train,
train,
and it
yeah,
just sends him off. And to me, that alone was enough to be like, all right, I see where this characterization was
yeah.
in episode 3.
I love that whole sequence. I love the whole chase. I love how that battle travels. I love how it travels like throughout the galactic city, how it goes to the through the down the building and through the train station and ultimately to the underground whatever that facility is. I don't think it's ever been like explained. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of the whole like again how it travels the whole thing, the action and all of that.
Oh
And the
yeah.
humor is great. There's a few like really great humorous moments with like Palpatine and when Grievous makes his grand entrance, Palpatine is like, "How dare you, treat me like this?" And
Oh yeah.
yeah, such a great moment, a great
That,
character moment for Palpatine. So
that's such a funny thing with Palpatine. He's like, "You wouldn't dare harm me. Whatever would your masters think?" And it's
yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah,
knowing the context of what's going on, knowing Palpatine's true identity, you're like,
it's
"You
funny.
son of a bitch," and
It's
he's
really funny. Yeah,
and it's like, part of me was like, that's him just, that's him pretending to be the Chancellor, staying in character. But
yeah.
at the same time, I like to think that Sidious just being like, "Fuck you, Grievous, you ain't that tough."
Yeah, exactly, putting Grievous in his place, like reminding him, and it's worthwhile to note here, Grievous doesn't know that Palpatine is Sidious, but Dooku does. So, this is
Yeah.
the kind of difference between those two people.
All right, James, do you have anything to add to the whole Grievous talk that we've been kind of ranting on with?
Not really.
All right, DJ, I know you kind of cut out there for a second. Do you have anything you want to jump in with?
Well, just Grievous. This Grievous is a terrifying, yeah, memorable villain in Star Wars. And well, just if you with the later characterization making him a mustache twirly villain or a coward instead of keeping up with the consistency of him being the Jedi butcher.
Right.
Right. So yeah, yeah, I think we're all kind of in the agreement that, like, the 2D version, that I think we all can agree that was kind of our preferred version of Grievous.
It's my preferred version for sure. Though I would never say that I dislike the other take on Grievous. I like it, yeah, but yeah, it's my preference.
Yeah, I
The
think
Tartakovsky one.
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of shot the 3D one in the foot is that, to me, I feel like they used him a little too much as the
Yes,
main villain, in the sense that, like, I mean, he had to lose because in order for the story to happen as it happens, he kind of has to
yeah.
lose against the heroes.
And I felt like there were like at least one too many confrontations between Obi-Wan and Grievous.
Oh God, yes.
I always liked the idea that their confrontation, that their lightsaber battle in Revenge of the Sith was their first actual battle. I always liked that idea, but now that's gone. So
That's another thing, and it's one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of the 3D series, because in Episode 3, Anakin straight up says this is his first time meeting Grievous at that moment.
yeah,
And a lot of people, I don't want to say a lot of people, but it's something I also noticed, and I kind of forgot because of the 3D series, is that Obi-Wan straight up acknowledges that this is his first time meeting Grievous as well. He doesn't outright say it like Anakin does, but it's definitely implied.
Yeah.
And so it's like
the way they kind of address one another, and using
the way at the duel on when Obi-Wan and Grievous finally have their duel
on Utapau,
on Utapau. Yeah, I was gonna say Kashyyyk, Jesus Christ. But he's basically saying, "You fool! I've been trained in your Jedi arts
by Count
and it's like,
yeah. Why would you tell Obi-Wan that if he knows?
I feel like Obi-Wan should have been like, nigga, I know. We've been down this how many times have we done this dance? And then I get the feeling like they wanted to have at least some kind of like main villain, because they knew they couldn't do too much, obviously, with Sidious and Count Dooku.
I mean, they could have always like introduced a new big baddie, I suppose.
Maybe, but at the same that leads. Okay, so I see where you're coming from. To me, though, I feel like that can kind of lead to maybe a convolution, and that kind of leads into the final point I want to make before we end the stream. Is that, so you mentioned how they could have made a new character, a new villain for them to face off against. However, one of the biggest, probably the biggest difference of the 2D versus the 3D is the introduction of a very particular character. A character who, I would say, it's kind of 50-50 when you ask people how they feel about them. And that character is Ahsoka Tano.
Right.
Anakin's Padawan.
Right.
Who literally was there since the beginning, because since the Clone War cartoon, the 3D Clone Wars movie, and onward all the way to the point where she's essentially the main character.
Yeah.
Going up until season, well, it's kind of debatable for the early season, but season 7, she's pretty much the main character.
Right.
So now the question is for you gentlemen, how do you feel about Ahsoka Tano?
Well, who goes first?
I'm gonna go with DJ.
Honestly, I mean, in the past, I love Ahsoka, and I still do, but now looking back at Clone Wars, like in retrospect, and with honestly, I don't know, I just felt, I feel like it could have developed better as a character, because while she does eventually become a great Jedi after leaving the Jedi Council, although she, at the same time she kind of takes up a little too much of the spotlight.
Yeah, he makes a great point there, DJ, that I'd like to expand upon when it's my turn. So,
all right, I'll go with James just because, since you kind of have your thought already ready to go. So I'm gonna go with James just real quick.
I mean, I enjoyed the character in the 3D Clone Wars. I haven't kept up with Star Wars very much since the kind of original handful of seasons of the 3D Clone Wars, just because Disney Star Wars, I'm just not a fan.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
I thought Force Awakens was okay, and I completely lost interest after The Last Jedi.
Yeah. I think
So
I think a lot of people have
I
that.
don't know about Ahsoka after like the first 4 or 5 seasons of the 3D series, but like I remember enjoying the character.
Well, because like she's not even. Well, season 6 is kind of funny when it comes to 3D Clone Wars because it's not really season 6. It became season 6 technically speaking after what happened with season 7. But
Right.
yeah, like she's in seasons 1 through 5, and then season 6 she's not even there at all.
Right.
Then she comes back in season 7, and it's like pretty much the season is focused on her.
Her. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess you can kind of argue that maybe like they had, because I know there was a lot of like concepts for episodes they wanted to do, a lot of stories that kind of got relegated to books and comic books. But I feel like I don't know, because like, and I know it's debatable because a lot of people are like, oh, Filoni, you know, that's his OC, and of course he's got to put a lot of emphasis on her. But just to
Right.
give the benefit of the doubt, I would like to think that maybe it was one of those like, all right, we don't have as many episodes as we would want. We gotta have to streamline this, so let's just put the focus on one character. Which, for better or for worse, I mean, if that's what their intent was, I can see where they were coming from.
Yeah, that's a storytelling preference for most people. The Star Wars prequels are kind of unique from and distinct from Hollywood productions, which they're not. They're indie movies. They're unique in the sense that they don't really have a main character. At least Episode 1 and 2 don't have a main character as much. They are this kind of amalgamation stories almost from different perspectives, different points of view. There's no central character in Phantom Menace. There's no central character in Attack of the Clones. You could make the argument the central character in Revenge of the Sith is actually Anakin, but even then, that's kind of there's an argument to be made that maybe it's Anakin and Obi-Wan and also Palpatine and Padme if you want Padme in there as well. So, but back to the Ahsoka, right? For me, I'd never had a problem with Ahsoka's characterization as such. I like her as a character. I think she's likable. I think she was a bit of a, a bit insufferable, toward the start of the show, but that was probably by design, I think, to have her be a bit of a, this wisecracking, little creature, I suppose. But then as it goes on, she develops, she matures, and yeah, I don't have any problems with that. However, she always felt out of place conceptually for me. The idea of Ahsoka and her role, the idea that she's supposed to be the Padawan learner of Anakin Skywalker, who was supposed to be a Padawan himself up until toward the final third of the Clone Wars when he's knighted in the original timeline anyway. I don't have a problem with her characterization, but I have a problem with her as a concept, her function in the setting. So she always felt out of place to me because of those reasons. So,
and honestly, that's always been kind of my issue with her, because when she first was like, I don't want to count the 3D movie because like it's part of it, but it's kind of its own beast in of itself.
I mean,
but like
the 3D movie was 3 episodes of the show, though, like stitched together as a one feature film. So
yeah. But
yeah.
So yeah, when it comes to Ahsoka, it's like I have a very similar opinion in the sense that like I don't hate her. I do like the growth that she has,
Right.
but it does seem very like out of place in the sense that like you're telling me that Anakin, who wasn't even a Jedi, like he essentially
Knight.
like he just became a knight,
Yeah.
and he was already given a Padawan, and it's like unless there's some kind of deeper narrative in the sense that like Yoda or whoever was like, we know he's not supposed to have a Padawan, but we're gonna do it because blank. But they don't really have that excuse. They kind of just give him one, and to me, not necessarily that excuse would fix it, but it does seem very out of place.
Yeah, and I sort of I should amend that, or by saying I get what her function is. I get what her thematic and storytelling function is. She is to serve as a foil to Anakin in a certain kind of way, and also teach him responsibility. That's almost like stated explicitly on screen, actually, in the movie, I think. But yeah, just as the idea of Anakin having a Padawan always that never sat right with me at all. So
Yeah, because and to me, it's one of the in kind of the hindsight, kind of a retrospective way. It does. I I can see where people are coming from when they say there's very clear favoritism of Filoni towards her,
right,
because
yeah,
in one of the first episodes of the show, she goes up against General Grievous, and keep in mind this is right after. Well, I won't say right after. This is when the 2D show was still kind of fresh in everybody's mind.
yeah,
So you're kind of like, all right, this guy took on 5 whole Jedi, killed most of them, and now he's fighting a Padawan, and you're like, she's gonna die. This is the end of the character, right? But she
yeah,
doesn't. And even if you want to ignore that debut of Grievous, let's say you take out the context of the 2D show,
right,
still given what he is at that time, she still should have died. I appreciate the fact that she essentially lost that duel, ended up having to run away from him.
yeah.
But at the same time, it's like this girl should have died here.
I mean, but there's more that goes into these battles than just experience. There's circumstance of environment. There's the mental state of a person. You should know as a soldier, by the way. I think, um, sort of your sort of kind of combat performance is affected by different kinds of things, right? So it's
Right,
it's
because
not that clear cut necessarily always. So
yeah, that's another thing. When going back to Grievous just for a
right,
brief moment, in that especially in the 2D show where it's emphasized that fear is one of his main tactics.
yes,
The
yeah,
whole standing up really tall, stretching out his droid appendages, the
right,
whole weird combat movements, using a lightsaber with his foot, all of that was meant to,
unorthodox, yeah,
yeah, all the
yeah,
unorthodox moves was all meant to throw off his opponent and to basically get them to go what the hell do I do against that, and
yeah, exactly,
get
yeah,
them to lose their confidence. But that aside, it's still there were several. I won't say several moments because I didn't get to. I rewatched some of the 3D show. I got to about season 3,
right.
but I have seen all of it minus season 7. But there were moments where it just felt like Ahsoka should not have made it past this. It just feels like, because and it kind of doesn't help that the entire time when watching anything prequel related to me,
Right.
If a character doesn't show up or isn't mentioned in the original trilogy or expanded media, I'm like, they had to die during Order 66 slash Episode 3 slash before Episode 4, right?
Yeah.
That was always my thought process going into characters like that.
Yeah.
Asajj Ventress, I didn't know her fate, but the fact that she's never mentioned in the original trilogy, anything like that, I was like, she dies, right? General
Well,
Grievous before Episode 3 came out, I was like, he dies, right?
well, the canon policy on Wikipedia, which I edited for a decade, 10 years from 2005 to 2015, the canon policy was always unless mentioned otherwise, assume that the person is alive and well, actually. So the
Right.
assumption in Legends was always that Ventress, after the events in Star Wars Obsession, the comic series by Dark Horse, where she appears for the very last time before she disappears from the universe entirely, the assumption is that she is alive and somewhere out there doing whatever. So that was the
Right.
canon policy at the time, at least. So,
But see, the issue I had with Ahsoka, and again, this was before I knew everything that came later in this terms of season 7, Rebels, all that jazz. Before that, however, it's always seemed very weird to me that a character who had such an attachment to Anakin and the light side of the Force, regardless of her walking away from the Jedi Order,
yeah.
it always seemed weird to me that such a character would see the rise of the Empire and
Mm.
do
not
anything
do
about
anything.
it.
Yes,
And
yeah,
I don't mean like
Which-
supporting the Jedi. I'm talking like just in general supporting the
yeah,
rebellion
and
in general.
that's why like I've always yeah. Go ahead, just
Go ahead.
yeah, DJ, go ahead. Yeah,
Which which brings well, actually raises a couple of red flags to like audience members or even writers, because you would think that after leaving the Jedi Order and becoming a great Jedi, she would it would make sense for her to help the rebellion as well as other Jedi that have survived the massacre
yeah,
from Order 66. So by establishing that she didn't do that in Rebels,
yeah.
it screams out of character, which brings up like some of the grievances that some fans have with their
Yeah,
like
this is
out
the
of
very
character.
reason. This is the reason, right? Why I always felt like the Clone Wars, the 3D series feels more at home with the Disney canon, right? It it like fleshes out Ahsoka more. You know, Ahsoka has a story after she leaves the Order in the Disney continuity, right? She has none in Legends. That's where her story ends, right? When she walks away down the stairs toward the sunset, right? That's where the story ends for her in the expanded universe continuity. So
Yeah, because I remember it like because even when that episode season 5 ended and I watched it,
right,
at that point I just in my brain I just automatically assumed either she just doesn't show back up or she dies during Order
yeah,
66. Like that
yeah,
was just my excuse for why she didn't show up in the
yeah,
original trilogy because she would
Mhm.
need one. And this is again we're talking about the 2D 3D Clone Wars, but I'm going to sidetrack to Rebels in that it shows that she was kind of help establish the rebellion, which I thought was kind of all right. It did still seem kind of shoehornish for her to be there. But then it came to the duel between her and Vader on freaking
Malachor,
Malachor. And to me, again, this
which
is
is not Malachor. It's not Malachor 5.
yeah,
So
it's not yeah.
it
But
looks nothing like Malachor 5. Might as well be a different place. So the name is the same. Everything
yeah,
else is
it's like
different.
Malachor
It's different.
Yeah,
6. Let's just call
Malachor 6. Yeah, let's call it Malachor 6.
it. So but basically so when that episode when I got to that episode cuz I watched the first few seasons of Rebels. When I got to that episode, I was thinking like she dies here, right? Like
Right.
she tries to pull Anakin back to the light as Vader, and he says no and kills her. Like that's the
Yeah.
end of her story. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's a perfect end to that character.
Yeah.
She
Exactly.
she walked away from the Jedi Order, and regardless of how you want to feel about it, this from speaking from this perspective alone of the 3D
Yeah.
show, I was like, this is a good end to the character. She walked away from the
Yeah.
Jedi Order. Her master went to the dark side. She tried one last time to bring it to the light, but she was not
And
the
she
person
failed.
meant to
Yeah.
do it, and she failed.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right. That was the point I was going for. I was going to go for actually, just expanding on your point there. The idea. I like the idea that like it would have made Vader seem even more like irredeemable. At the end. Yeah, like you're looking at somebody who like kills someone who was very close to him. Some essentially almost like a sister.
Hmm.
To a certain kind of
Mhm.
extent. So, yeah, yeah, it would have worked. No,
And
they didn't go for that. I do believe, and just again, like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I do believe like George had different plans for Ahsoka than Dave Filoni did. I
so
think
yeah,
George
like
wanted to kill Ahsoka off.
so I don't I'm because this is I'm not saying you're wrong, but I only know this based on rumor. I've never read
Rumor. Okay,
this
so it's
anywhere, so
rumor.
I
All
can't
right.
say
Okay.
for sure. But the rumor
Right.
is that the original plan was for Ahsoka to die during Order 66.
Right.
Supposedly, again, this is supposedly. This is back when season 7 was originally ended. This is like
I
back when
see.
season 5 was the end. Supposedly, that the show was supposed to carry on and lead up to Order 66 to the
Right.
point
I see.
where
Yeah.
um, Ahsoka leads a group of clones to take back Mandalore from Darth Maul or Maul.
Right. Right.
So, in the original context, that was supposed to be it. But supposedly, she was supposed to die during Order 66. Like that was supposedly what
Right.
condition George Lucas had. And
Right.
the rumor is that she became so popular / Clone Wars 3D became so popular that they were like, nah, we can't kill her off. We could basically they're basically saying we can milk this character even more.
Yeah.
Again, that's a rumor. I don't know if that's true or not.
All right. I will say though, I like Ahsoka's. I only saw the first 2 seasons of Rebels. I watched it with my friend who did sort of podcast at the time, and I watched it to kind of have a conversation with him about it. And I liked the first 2 seasons, and I liked the idea of the formation of the rebellion in the Rebel show a lot better than what was shown in the Force Unleashed video game. I think the Force Unleashed, the story overall is very weak in the game, and the formation of the Alliance is an even weaker element of that already weak story. So, yeah, I like the idea that she's fulcrum. I like the idea that she's the one like behind all of this with coordinating with other people like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, and people like this. So I like the idea of these rebel cells coming together and creating the Alliance as opposed to whatever it was that happened in The Force Unleashed. I can't remember.
It's funny that you say that because The Force Unleashed is actually one of my favorite Star Wars games, and although I'm not going to sit here and argue that the story is perfect, I do like the story, at least from the surface level of it, in the sense that Vader has a secret apprentice who he's training to take out the Emperor, which, is very old school Sith fashion.
Yeah.
And
at least since the days of like Revan and Malak, but really really after Bane. So
but even that, in that sense, that like I like that context. And one thing that this is kind of fan fiction on my side, but I always like the idea of Ahsoka and Star Killer Galen Merrick. I think that's his real name. I always like the idea of that these two, because there's actually little hints to it in that like these were both Anakin / Vader's apprentices. And one thing that always stuck out to me is that in the video game Force Unleashed, Starkiller fights with a backhanded style.
Yes, he does.
And Ahsoka in the show fights with a backhanded style.
That's a really good observation. That's actually a feature of Shien. So
and I always like that because to me that was like a subtle.
It's directly downstream from Anakin's teaching. So
and so one thing I've always wanted to see, this was back before the Disney acquisition. So, but back before that, I always wanted to see some kind of interaction between Ahsoka and Starkiller, even if it was like a what if kind of story, because given the context of what we saw in Force Unleashed, he dies. So
I think DJ wanted to break in here and say something about this.
Go ahead, man.
I was about to say it would have been nice to see a what if scenario of the interaction and connection between Ahsoka and Galen Merrick, because as you pointed out with his fighting style is backhanded, which goes back to Ahsoka. Like it brings up so many storytelling possibilities of what would happen if the two of them met, if Ahsoka survived the Order 66 massacre.
Right.
Honestly, like you could even take. Like again, I like the story of The Force Unleashed. I really do. I'm not saying it's perfect. I do like it for what it is.
You don't have to justify your taste to me, man. I don't care. I'm
just saying. But like, one thing I always thought about be kind of cooling to do is like, let's say you had to retell The Force Unleashed to make it fit into the Disney-ish canon.
Right.
I could totally see Ahsoka sort of taking the place of Ram Koda in the sense that he's the one who kind of teaches Starkiller the way back to the light.
Yeah,
I can see that. I can see that where it's like,
that would make that serve work on a thematic level, or at the very least, she could have been one of, or she in such an alternate story, she could be one of the Jedi that the Starkiller then goes and takes down, right?
Yeah, and
because Vader does have this. The persona of Vader when Anakin, when Anakin dies and Vader takes over, Vader does have this obsession with taking out his past, right? Destroying everything that reminds him of Anakin Skywalker. So killing Ahsoka in that context, like, makes total sense. So it would have worked with Starkiller, I think. Although it's personal confrontation between Vader and Ahsoka makes a lot more sense now that I think about it, though.
I just think there's a bit more potential in storytelling if you were to have those two interact and then have her take the place of Ram Kota.
Yep.
But back on track, because that's a whole side tangent.
Yeah, different can of worms.
So yeah, like back to Ahsoka in terms of like the 3D, 2D show is that like I can see where people come from in where they say they like Ahsoka. Like, don't get me wrong, I can see exactly where they're coming from. I kind of like her. I won't say I like her to the same degree as some other people, but at the same time, I can kind of see the argument where people say that she's been around for too long.
Well, I mean, you mean like been around too long as in universe perspective, right?
In universe perspective,
right,
yes.
right, okay. So, because I was going to make the argument that, I mean, like, to be fair, like in the Legends continuity, right, Luke, Han, and Leia were around for 30, 40 years, right? They had children and stuff like this. So, again, I suppose it comes down to a matter of taste. But I'm actually I have to like get going very soon in like 10 minutes or so.
Oh yeah, I was gonna end it at the 2-hour mark.
All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. So okay, I'll just stay until then.
All right. So I'm trying to think. Let me see if there was something else I wanted to bring up. So we went to the clones, talked about the villains, talked about Grievous, talked about Ahsoka. I guess the last thing we can kind of end on is trying to think of there's a lot of things we could talk about when it comes to like what the shows do differently and stuff they add. I guess we can kind of segregate this one in kind of like half and half. So in the 2D show, it is what it is. There's not really a lot of character introductions in the sense of like new characters being coming in or old characters being brought back. However, in the 3D show, there's a lot of that stuff, and not counting the side characters like some of the pirates and some of the extra clones. However, there are there's more than two, but there are two huge differences when it comes to the 3D show. One is, as we mentioned before, the Mortis arc.
Right.
And then the second, and probably one of the more controversial ones, is the resurrection of Darth Maul.
Yeah. Good God. Where do I start with those? The Mortis arc, I'm just going to give my quick thoughts. Once again, I have like 8 minutes left. So the Mortis arc is... I don't remember much about it, actually. I suppose kind of mentally blocked that out of my purview. I didn't like it that much, you can tell. So...
it's one
I
of
think
those.
It revolves around the chosen one prophecy, and they go to this planet called Mortis, and there's like personification of light and dark side, and I can't remember much about it.
Yeah, it's confusing. DJ, what are your thoughts on? Well, we'll come back to Maul, but let's keep with the Mortis real quick. What's your thoughts on that arc?
I thought the Mortis arc was interesting as we see when we're visiting a new planet and we meet the personifications of the light side, the dark side, and their father. While I do enjoy it for what it is, I acknowledge though that it's not perfect or something you want to go back to in hindsight. It's odd.
Yeah.
All right. James, what are your thoughts on Mortis arc?
I'm gonna be 100% honest. I don't think I ever watched that far into the series.
Based.
Or if I did, I don't remember it.
I think that's
absolutely.
I want to say
It's
that's
not
like
based. It's just I never watched it.
Yes, it's based. just take the W and
No,
just
because
I
I don't agree with the intentions behind calling it based.
it is based.
I think it's season 4, and it's we kind of hit the gist of it. Essentially, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka get stranded on this planet, and it's inhabited by these 3 beings: the father, the brother, and the sister. the
Right,
daughter,
right
the
now I
son,
remember.
and the son. Yeah, you know what I mean. And the daughter is essentially the light side of the Force. The son is the dark side of the Force, and the father is kind of just the Force. And they are essentially. I don't know if it's the show. I don't know if it's Clone Wars 3D or Rebels, but at some point they get referred to as literal gods. They literally
Okay,
get referred to as the Mortis gods. And
right.
personally, to me, I remember watching this, and I'm kind of on the side of DJ, where it's like this is kind of cool for what it is, but at the same time, it's like, what the hell is this? Like, where did this come from in terms of Star Wars canon? Like, what the fuck?
No, I don't have a problem with the idea of the idea of having like god creatures, because Jedi onto and Sith onto themselves are demigods. They are in communion with this thing in the universe. They draw their power from the supreme reality of the Force. So the idea of having godlike creatures is not foreign to me as a concept in the Star Wars setting. However, the treatment, the how they conceptualize balance in the Force in that episode is wrong, at least from the George Lucas point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Balance is actually just it's not a balance between two forces. It's like literally the destruction of the Sith and the
right. Because
dark Force
Yeah.
users. So
yeah, because in the original context of Star Wars, like the dark side is it's a cancer. It's like
yes, yeah,
because
it's an unnatural cancer upon the fabric of reality. That's what it is. So
yeah, because I know, and this I think this episode kind of leads this arc is kind of where a lot of fans get the idea that the force is always the balance of the force is meant to be controlling the light and the dark at the same time,
yeah,
which
but it's not.
from an outsider, I want to say outsider's perspective, but from that context alone, I see where they're coming from, in
Right.
which they would get that. But
Yeah.
from the original Legends continuity, or
And not
anything you
just
want to say before that,
not just that, the movies themselves.
right? Like the balance between of the force is not the balance of light and dark. It's straight up the elimination of the dark.
Of the dark, yeah. So
And
so the idea of the balance goes from being a sort of equilibrium between two equal and opposite forces. It goes from that to being more like a balance of
good and evil.
homeostasis, almost homeostasis.
Yeah,
Uh,
yin yang kind of thing.
no. That's like the equilibrium between two forces thing. I'm talking about more like kind of like you could conceptualize the force maybe as a kind of tightrope walker, and then the tightrope walker trying to kind of maintain his balance as strong winds try and knock him off the rope. That's kind of like how balance works in the Star Wars universe, instead of being the scale that tries to balance two equal and opposite forces.
Right.
It's kind of a misconception of the fans of the idea what balance means in the context of the setting, right?
Yeah, because like I feel like it's something that like this is probably gonna sound more conspiracy theorist, but like it feels like when it comes to the Disney canon, and I'm not gonna sit here and rant on the Disney canon because that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But I feel like the Disney canon that's their, for better or for worse, because they are two separate canons of EU
Right.
Legends versus Disney. I feel like in the Disney canon, it is the Force is meant to be represented as that good light and dark are meant to coexist at the same time.
Right.
I'm not
right,
saying that's
yeah.
the right way it's supposed to be. I'm saying I feel like that's
That's the
direction
Disney
they want
take on
that's their take
on
on
the
it.
thing. Yep.
Which to me, I again I get that. I get that perspective because that's something that we've seen a lot in a lot of stories. However,
Yeah.
it takes away the uniqueness of George Lucas's Star Wars, in the sense that this isn't that kind of story where you're supposed, because in most stories you're supposed to balance the light and the dark, the good and the evil. But in
Yep.
George Lucas's, no, it's like no, the evil is the evil.
Yeah.
It's the evil.
It's a very
Good
I
and evil is evil.
yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point, DJ. And I made this point several times over myself. The fact that Star Wars is preachy without being preachy. It's a very strict morality setting. It knows its moral laws. It knows its ethical boundaries. It knows what it calls evil, and it knows what it calls good.
Right.
So yeah.
All right. So we're hitting 2 hours. We'll go just a little bit over, but I just want to hit on
that's fine. Yep.
this last point. So
Right.
as I said before, Darth Maul in the original Legends continuity, he dies. Episode 1, he dies. He shows up in like weird flashbacks / there's moments where he comes back, quote unquote, but it's always like a forced vision, or it's like someone pretending to be him. But for the most part, he's dead. However, in 3D Clone Wars, he
literally comes back. Yes,
droid legs and everything.
Yeah,
and so I like, speaking solely from the 3D show's standpoint.
Right.
I like his characterization and arc he goes through in that sense. I think that's a very good arc for a character. I think it's very interesting to see him go from a Sith Lord to essentially just a dark Jedi.
Crime Lord.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. He becomes a freaking crime lord, and like
it's a downgrade though. It's a downgrade. It's not a
downgrade, but it's still pretty cool to see someone go from that. And essentially, like, and his story in hindsight is very sad in the sense that like he always gets these massive victories only to get the harshest loss possible. Like,
and this is somebody who spent the early years of his life as a pawn of somebody else. So
yeah, like he in episode 1 he kills Qui-Gon Jinn, he's not an official Jedi Master, but he basically is one. Like, he's got the skills for it. He defeats him, then only to be defeated by his Padawan.
Like, Qui-Gon is a master. He did reach the master rank.
Right. So, but you know what I'm saying? Like, he beats a Jedi Master only to be defeated by a Padawan. Like, that's a huge L.
Yes. Take the L. Take the L, Maul. I will say, my thoughts on Maul are very brief. His resurrection are very. I agree with like what you said about his characterization. I like the idea that he goes from. I like the metamorphosis that he goes through throughout the series. For what little I've seen, that is, I haven't seen the whole show, but like my take is very brief, which is the fucker should have stayed dead. That's it.
All right, DJ, what are your thoughts?
When I was younger, I heard Darth Maul was coming back. I was like, what?
Yeah.
What are they gonna bring back? And at first, like, I that was cool. But looking back at it now, I was like, why did they bring him back?
Yeah.
But I think what it was is that, like, Filoni had an idea, and I wouldn't be surprised if they intentionally had this idea for, like, an original character, because they do introduce Savage Opress first.
Savage Opress, who has the single dumbest, stupidest fucking name in the history of the setting.
Yeah,
that name is so supremely dumb. I can't process it.
Yeah, but like, I feel like terrible. I feel like I don't know the behind the scenes stuff. I'm not Dave Filoni. I don't have that kind of insight, but I wouldn't be surprised if the original plan was to kind of just have an original character who was from Maul's species, and then
I think what happened with Maul. Yeah, I think what happened with Maul, actually, and this is my conjecture based on what I've seen. I think this might have been a case of like audience criticism getting to George, like the criticism of Maul having too little screen time, and
oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And I think George should have stayed true to his artistic sensibilities and just kept Maul down. I think he should have stayed dead. But
yeah, I think if anything, because I know the comics do this, is that any exploration of Maul should have just been like, this is what he did before episode 1.
Exactly.
Going after like assassin targets for
and the Black Sun.
Jedi.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
All right, James, what are your thoughts on Maul?
Again, I didn't really watch that part of the 3D series. Like, you kind of passed where I'm familiar because it's been a long time since I've seen any of the 3D series.
It's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that because it kind. I'm kind of end on this point is that one of the biggest things because when I was rewatching the shows is that one thing I kind of noticed is that in terms of like how the story is presented, in the sense that like the first few seasons of 3D versus the entirety of the 2D, is that while yes, like the 3D tries to go deeper than what is necessary when it comes to certain aspects and stories, they do essentially touch on the same things in a sense like these are different battles that took place over the course of the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
However, it's not until like I want to say maybe season 3, season 4 is when the 3D kind of just goes on its own thing and it starts exploring plot
yes.
points that
Yeah.
like just didn't exist in the original Legend of Continuity. One being the whole Maul storyline, and the Mortis arc. And part of me has always thought that a lot of it came from the fact that the 3D show, because it came out at a time where at that point there was no new Star Wars movies coming out.
Yeah,
There was nothing really new
Sith
coming
had
out.
come out like episode 3 had come out like 3 years ago by that point.
Yeah, so it's like I feel like they kind of I don't want to say took advantage. They kind of jumped on the opportunity that this is our main route to tell Star Wars. I mean, obviously they had comics and stuff, but like,
Star Wars at this point is not dead. The comics are coming out, new books are coming out all the fucking time. Games are coming out, but as far as Star Wars being on TV or being on the big screen, that's over.
Yeah,
at this
that
point.
was over at that point.
Yep,
So it's like I feel like as the 3D show went on, they kind of realized that like we can do a lot of stuff with this show, and I feel like because of the success that it was getting, whoever was, Lucas was in charge at the time, so he was kind of probably told Filoni is like, you know what, he probably gave him guidelines to eventually hit, but he was probably kind of like, you know what, let's see what you can do with this.
Yeah,
I'll give you my blessings to do this, this, and this.
Yeah,
but
and
I wouldn't be
just
surprised if he gave him, like,
overwrite the expanded universe was also one of the just not directors, but the you're free to like override whatever you want. So, it's one of my sort of. I'm a huge fan of George. I'm a fan of his work. I'm a fan of him as an artist. But like, I don't agree with everything. Obviously, every decision the guy has made ever, and like to me, by the time the 3D Clone Wars comes out, right? At that point, I'm 14 years old, right? I'm getting to my mid-teens, right? I'm getting to my mid-teens, and at that point, the Clone Wars have been done to death. The multimedia franchise have been going on for several years. The Republic, the MedStar novels had come out. The Republic comic series had reached its conclusion. Sith had come out, all these different things. And by the time the 3D, the Filoni show comes out, I'm like, there's not much to tell here anymore. I think the Clone Wars are done for the most part. So can we just move on to a different point in time, maybe?
Yeah, and
because with the Clone, after Clone Wars came to its end, and the expanded universe has been acted as a organic continuation of Star Wars. Even if we didn't have the movies and TV shows, we had books, comics, and the video games to continue on where Star Wars left off.
Yeah, because I remember when the original 3D show ended at season 5, and they didn't get renewed for any future seasons. I do know that quite a few storylines that were meant to take place in the Clone Wars show got adapted into books
Dark Horse comics. Yeah,
Dark Horse comics. One of them being Son of Dathomir, which is it literally takes place immediately after Sidious captures Maul at Mandalore.
Yeah, I read that one at the time.
To me, that was a great comic. I think again, that was before the Marvel days of Star Wars comics. So, but it
Oh
was
God!
to me that was a very
Don't get me started on that one. Don't get me started because I'm never
yeah,
gonna stop once I go
yeah.
down that tangent.
But basically, like I read that book and I have it. It's not my favorite Star Wars comic, but I love it. And in that, like it, that book alone sold me on the idea of Maul's resurrection. I still,
Yeah.
I still don't think it's perfect, and I do think ultimately it should not have happened. But if there ever was a case for you to convince me that it was not a bad idea,
Right.
that book helps it because it's part of his character arc in the sense of like what comes later, and it closes off the ties between the Night Sisters because despite
Right.
the problems that whole storyline has, I do like it when storylines have a conclusive end, and that book gives you that
Yeah.
conclusive end.
Yeah.
And then I know what was the other one? There's another book. What's his name? Quinlan Voss?
Dark Disciple. Yeah.
Dark Disciple. There it is. Yeah.
Which retcons the shit out of Quinn's story. Again, don't get me started on that. I'm never gonna
Yeah, but
stop.
I know
Yeah,
that's one of them
I know
that's
I know what you're
was
talking
originally meant to be
about.
a Clone Wars.
DJ, what was that?
I said I know what you're gonna say, and yeah, I'm with you. I didn't like how Quinn was
Yeah.
being handled in Clone
Yeah.
Wars.
It was terrible. It was like they made Quinn. He went from being this cool, awesome, like ethically questionable gray Jedi to trained by Master Thorm, who trained Ayla Secura in turn. He went from that to being this cool, radical surfer dude from the Bay Area, right? In the Clone Wars animated series. I was never a fan of that depiction. It was terrible. I thought it was awful. And the Dark Disciple didn't help that idea. Like, yeah, it was awful. Just oh God! I wish I could just erase the whole thing out of my memory.
Yeah, but
Also wasn't a particular fan of how of the depiction of the Night Sisters because they weren't really really evil. They're just neutral. But
No.
in the 3D series, they paint them as villainous. Whereas
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they
so
become this
to
satanic.
the extended
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and then
The-
like
yeah, the Night Sisters before the Clone Wars series, they were just kind of this like third force using organization, you know, that was separate from Jedi and Sith. So
yeah, and one thing I do like, and again, it goes back to Grievous, is that, and they did kind of botch it, is when he leads the slaughter of the Night Sisters. I do think that was a cool moment for the character, that version of the character in the 3D
yeah,
show, where he finally gets a win. Yeah, it's still bullshit that he ultimately lost the duel against Ventress,
yeah,
which I think was bullshit. I think it should have
yeah.
been straight up like he beat her, and then they still defend themselves, but he's like,
I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, like Ventress contended with Mace Windu on not even footing, but yeah, she did. So,
But I'm saying in the sense of like, given what the story was trying to do, in the sense this is the downfall of the Night Sisters.
right,
I think it would have
yep,
been interesting
yep,
to have her straight up be defeated by
yeah,
Grievous, and then the slaughter proceeds,
yeah,
showing like because one of her, that was part of her character arc as well, in the sense that like she's starting to realize that this path down the dark side wasn't really the smartest idea, and
yeah. In the Legends continuity, that also happens, although it happens in a very different kind of way. In Legends, at the conclusion of the Obsession arc, which is a series by Dark Horse Comics, fantastic. Go check it out. She is betrayed by Dooku, essentially. And she's like, this was a raw deal. So I'm out of here. Like, fuck the war, fuck the Jedi, fuck the Republic, fuck the CIS, fuck the Sith. I'm out of here. I'm taking my own path. I like that idea. So
yeah, and so yeah, let me. All right, we're already past the 2 hour mark, so
yeah,
I'll go
we are.
ahead and
And
wrap
I
this.
really have to like get going here. And
All right, so
I
I
got
mean,
work to do. So and my day is like starting. It's like 9:23 right now.
all right,
So
so we all said our piece. We've all reached our conclusion. Both shows
yeah.
are great. It doesn't matter which one you like. Go watch them if you want. So I appreciate everyone for coming on. I
Hey, no
appreciate it.
problem. I was very happy to have this conversation. Very happy to be here. I think it was fun. I'm very happy to come on again, whether it be Star Wars or Terminator or whatever else you were talking about topics here. So,
Right.
yeah, very happy. Yeah.
Oh,
All
same
right.
here.
So, yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone who showed up. Thank you for everyone who watched or who may watch this later in the future. And have a good night.
See you, everybody.
Yeah.